Texas and Ohio State or the field for the national championship. So I was on Twitter, and I want to give praise to this guy for fielding this question, because this is a question I actually ask Mark every year. So I'm going to call in at some point and ask him how many teams it would take for him to take these teams or the field. So College Football Tracker on Twitter or X said Ohio State and Texas or the field for the national championship. So I'd like you guys to weigh in as well in the comments. Ohio State is plus 500. Texas is plus 550. This is the next 10 of the field. UGA plus 650, Penn State plus 750, Oregon plus 850, Alabama plus 1,200, Notre Dame plus 1,200, Clemson plus 1,600, LSU plus 2,000, Michigan plus 2,500, Ole Miss plus 3,000, and Miami of Florida plus 3,000. Gerald, are you taking Ohio State and Texas or the field?
This was really hard. I spent a lot of time flip-flopping about this. The one that gives you the most pause is probably Penn State. I think of it all. I think Penn State might be if this wasn't a Texas podcast, right? I would say that probably Penn State probably is a favorite to win the national championship. There are a lot of folks that feel that way, but ultimately, I'm going Texas and Ohio State. I think there is a lot that can be said. I think the first thing in this kind of pairs with a little bit what we just talked about, like Ohio State's losing a lot, but when you ask who is the best defensive player in the country, they might be in Columbus. Who's the best offensive player in the country? They might just be in Columbus, right? When you talk about Jeremiah Smith at wide receiver, as a freaking true sophomore, which is nuts. So if we talk about high-end skill players, right, those two guys are second to none in the country. They're a super talented team. When you look at blue chip ratio, they're a top 5 team. When you look at total talent composite numbers, I think they're upwards of a 93, almost a 93 and a half, which is nuts. And Texas, shockingly, in the same realm, right? Texas is a top 5 blue chip ratio. We talk about blue chip ratio, by the way. If you don't know the blue chip ratio, it's the ratio of 4 and 5 stars versus the rest of the guys on your team. And so Texas and Ohio State are both upwards of 65 or 70% of their rosters are made up of 4-star and 5-star guys. So that's just a key indicator of their ability. Texas, I think, actually has a higher total talent composite number. I think they're in a 94-ish range. So when you look at the guys on the field, the Jimmies and Joes of it, I think that they are 2 of the top 5 teams in the country. And when you look at play callers and signal callers, when you combine that, Sark and his staff been together now for 5-6 years, they're really, really good. They're some of the best in the country. Ryan Day has lost a lot of his coaching staff, but ultimately I think they've reloaded pretty well in those areas. And so, I'm going to put myself out there, and I think Texas and Ohio State, if I had to make the bet, if I had to put money on it, I'd feel pretty solid about it.
No, I think it's definitely hard. I think when I always feel this question to people, you end up having 3 to 4 teams versus the field in a typical year. I think this year's different. I think you could have 7 to 8 teams versus the field because there's so many unknowns. We've talked about how many teams are replacing their quarterback, and that's why I would go with the field here, because Ohio State, Texas have totally new quarterbacks. Do I think I know Arch Manning is going to be really good? Yes. Do I think I know Julian Sayin is going to be pretty damn good? Yes. But the thing is, with the field, I get some knowns. I get Penn State with Drew Aller. I get Clemson with Cade Klubnik. I get LSU with Nussmeier. So I get some knowns there, and there's still not that many. Georgia, unknown. Oregon, unknown. Alabama, unknown. Michigan, unknown. And I think they're too high, by the way. I would not have them that high. Ole Miss, unknown. Miami, unknown. The team also, you're giving me the field. I get to go teams deeper down the list. Arizona State, to me, I saw their odds plus 10,000 for them is just ridiculous. In a year where you have no idea what quarterback's going to be good, I have a pretty good idea. Sam Levitt's a pretty good quarterback. And if he gets on a hot streak and they have enough talent around him, and Kenny Dillingham, I think, is a really, really damn good football coach, they can go and compete for a national championship. I'm not going to say they win it, but the thing is, when you're laying money, guys, you got to remember, you want them to keep the ball rolling and go as far as possible. If they get to the Final Four, you're going to have cash out options at that point too. So, but I would take the field here, especially in an unknown year. Now, next year, this would be a super interesting conversation because Texas is going to have some dudes coming back on the defense like Colin Simmons. Maybe if Ethan Burke doesn't have the best year, he can come back as well. Derek Williams, unless he has an outstanding year, will probably be back. And then you're going to have Arch Manning in his second year because Arch Manning will be back. Julian Sayin will be in his second year with Jeremiah Smith in his third year. That could be a real conversation. But to me, there's too much inexperience on the Texas and Ohio State side to just put all my chips in on those two teams.
Yeah, you mentioned some of the reasons why that I waffled on this one. Penn State, Drew Allen. I think Penn State people. One of the hard parts about having these conversations about like who's going to win next year is that we sometimes have to like put the narratives to bed, right? James Franklin hasn't won any big games, right? Sark didn't win 10, wasn't a 10-win coach until 2 years ago, right? It's like it doesn't happen until it happens, right? So, and Penn State was a drive away from playing for a national championship last year. So yeah, whether or not Drew Aller coming back is a good thing or a bad thing for that's another conversation for another day. But ultimately, like, for me, there is a ton. It is going to be one of the more convoluted years that I think we've seen. This year is going to be a really good argument for why the current state of the college football playoff is good, right? Having a 12-team field, getting a lot of these talented teams. I think a lot of the conferences are going to end up cannibalizing themselves. I think it's going to be a very, very weird year. I think it's going to be tough to determine who the top 12 teams are, which is, it's ultimately a good thing. It's why the playoff, I think the stuff that they've done to the seeding, I think is also going to have an impact on that as well. But back to the point, for me, it comes down to ultimately when I look at the number of game changers on the field, I just bet Ohio State is going to have a bunch of game changers. I know Texas is going to have a bunch of game changers. And I think their ability to restock and reload is just unparalleled in this current world. Like there are very few teams that are able to restock and reload like these two have. And so it's a game of talent. It's a game of, blue chippers. And ultimately these are two of the teams that I think have done a better job nationally than anybody else at reloading that cupboard.
No, I don't disagree with that. And yeah, when we talk about that, I know Jeff Ketchum a couple days ago put out like super blue chips because that's something like, he created, invented, whatever he wants to say, where, upper 4-star and 5-star recruits. And I think Texas last year was 10 behind Ohio State, and this year they're only 5. So one more class, and they're basically going to be the same type of team on the field. So we're very close, and we were basically one play away to take that game in overtime last year. So I don't disagree. My thing is Clemson plus 1,600 to me is super low. Like if I'm betting on a team,
that's wild.
1,000, I'm taking Clemson because if you can get Cade Klubnik to replicate what he did versus Texas, not the whole season, but like 8-9 games, and then that type of defense that they have with Parker off the edge and Peter Woods, like those guys are top 10 picks potentially in the NFL draft, and you have 2 of them on defense. So, I mean, I don't understand that plus 1,600. You have a veteran quarterback that was playing his best ball down the stretch, plus 2 guys coming off the edge. I think that's crazy. They're plus 1,600, and that's another reason why I'm taking the field.
Yeah, there's easy money to be made. I think Clemson, Penn State's another one. LSU, I think, is somebody that, if they don't, especially if they don't do it this year, it's going to be really tough times for BK and the Bayou. So I think there's a lot of talent on the others. And we haven't even talked about Oregon, right? Oregon is one of those teams that's done a really good job of keeping the cupboard stocked with young players and talented players. So there's a lot out there. I cannot fault you at all for feeling like the field.
Yeah, Oregon, I'm not that high on, in Alabama. I'm not that high on either. Notre Dame. That's why I'm trying to understand why. To me, Clemson should be above them. I could see UJ, Penn State, and I think it should go Clemson. But I mean, Vegas knows what they're doing, so I guess I'll trust them on that. But I guarantee by halfway through the season, Clemson's odds are going to be probably half of that. Especially if they win that first game versus LSU. It's going to skyrocket.
Yeah, and again, I think Cade Klubnik could be a Heisman finalist, and anytime you have a Heisman finalist, you're in contention for a national championship.
100%. And that's what I think it's going to come down to. Which quarterback ends up as a top 5 pick in the NFL draft? I think whoever that guy is, that's probably the team that won or got in the national championship. That's the type of year we're looking at.
Yep.
Again, guys, please hit that like button. Please subscribe down below. It really helps us grow.